This is a Media Lab podcast.
Oh, Kyle, what's that smell? And what are you carrying there?
I think the less said about this, the better. I do need you to take this giant urn that I'm carrying. I'm just going to give that to you. And can you just take that out to the incinerator in the back? By the way, I built an incinerator in the back.
Can I open this top and see what's in it?
Don't open this. Do not open that.
All right. I'll wait until I get outside.
Yes. And then I can teach you the power of lying. In his own garage, Kyle has built a machine, cobbled together with parts found in his friend's church basement and a dumpster behind the local Dairy Queen. This monstrosity is now alive and evil. Kyle has convinced his friend Dave to help stop the apocalypse by reviewing films the machine picks. The ultimate purpose is still unknown, and Kyle could have probably done this himself, but he's not being dragged to hell alone. This is Kyle and Dave versus the machine. Welcome to Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine. My name is Kyle.
And my name is Michael Caine. No? Terrible?
Nailed it. You nailed it.
Practicing all weekend.
1000%.
Shit.
And I'm the machine.
This is a podcast where a sentient machine forces us to watch movies in order to prevent it from initiating the apocalypse, although we do tend to talk about the ideas of the movie rather than the movie itself. Today, we're going to be watching the film The Cider House Rules.
In other parts of the world, young men leave home and travel far and wide in search of a promising future. The only reason people journey here is for the orphanage.
They wanted a girl, Curly.
Nobody ever wants me.
I came as a physician to the abandoned children and unhappily pregnant women. Good night, you princes of Maine, you kings of New England.
Why does Dr. Larch say that every night? Does it because we like it?
And so I became the caretaker of many, father of none. Well, in a way, there was one.
Story time, Fuzzy.
His name was Homer Wells, and it was always clear to me
My father's eyes had closed upon the light of this world.
that he was a special boy.
Dave, I am so infinitely fascinated by what you're... Oh, Dave, we have a knock at the guest door here. Let me just open it up here. Alex, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Going very good. I am eternally grateful for people who find like this weird floating door out of the nether regions that appears before people, and you just decide to walk through it. So I appreciate you taking the plunge.
Well, isn't that what you're supposed to do when you find a door in the nether regions, is go through it?
Yeah, I think Aesop said that once or something like that. So thank you for joining us. Why don't we start here? Why don't you tell people who you are and what it is that you do?
I am Alex Williams. Like Kyle and Dave, I am also an avid podcaster. And that's pretty much what I do. I'm also studying right now, and I love movies.
That's awesome. What are you studying?
I actually just changed my major.
Oh, great.
I was going to become a high school teacher, but because of some very complicated things, I actually was more or less forced to change my major to applied business management.
Oh.
So it's going to be a shift, but it should be a good time.
You know, not that we have actually watched this week's movie yet, but if I know anything, you could just say that you're a teacher and just be a teacher. Like, I mean, I don't know if you actually need any special
Have you been studying calligraphy? If you have calligraphy skills, you're going to be okay.
Is that all that's needed?
That's pretty much
vellum
it.
paper, I think.
Well, perfect. I'll start sending out my resume.
That being said, do you have like 2 hours to spend watching the Cider House Rules with us?
You know what? I got all the time in the world right now.
Excellent. Just what I wanted to hear.
Well, that and your father saying I love you.
Why don't we start with you, Alex? I would love to know what is your past with the Cider House Rules?
I was 3 years old when it came out.
Excellent.
That's my whole experience with it. That's it. Also, I know Michael Caine.
Oh,
not personally, but I know of him.
I was hoping you did know him personally there for a minute. Do you even remember hearing about this movie? Being that you are essentially, I will say essentially a generation younger than I am. Like, does this have any cultural imprint for you, like, whatsoever? Or is this like a completely new movie when you came through that door?
Literally completely new movie. This is the first time I'm hearing about it.
Okay. Dave, how about yourself?
Yeah, I wish this was the first time I'd ever heard. No, I actually don't know much. I know the name. For whatever reason, I've heard of a cider house. I have not watched this movie. I don't know what it's about. I don't know if I care. I'm glad we're going to watch it because then I can say that I know something about it.
I have very limited past with this film as well. Like, really the only, awareness I have is because I do watch the Academy Awards literally every single year. And so this would have been, the year 2000. So I'd already watched 3 or 4 years at this point. It was nominated for a few awards: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor for Michael Caine. So I knew it from there. And I saw clips from it on Oscar night. I don't know how much you know about Billy Crystal when he hosted the Academy Awards, either of you, but he was very well known for doing basically this song medley at the very beginning that incorporated like every Best Picture nominee, and he would crack some jokes and stuff. And I don't know if I'm reading way too much into this again before we watch the movie, but he didn't talk about the Cider House Rules in his song for the Cider House Rules. All he talked about was how great of an actor Michael Caine is and all these roles he had been in. And then he went back to talking about movies for the other ones. And I was like, oh, that's kind of weird. But it was a fun little song. I wonder if that has anything to say about the movie we're about to watch. We'll find out. The other thing I do know, pretentious film nerds, and I would include myself as one of those.
You don't need to add film nerd in that sentence.
Tend to label the Cider House Rules as one of the worst Best Picture nominees of all time. But again, I have not seen it, so I cannot give my opinion on that outlook. Especially, again, when we're looking at the year 1999, and we think about the movies that were not nominated for Best Picture that year. We're talking like Magnolia, Fight Club, Man on the Moon. Like, there's some Talented Mr. Ripley. A lot of people put into that too.
The Red Violin.
Like, the Red Violin that Dave loves to bring up every episode, apparently. So there were these movies that were just shut out that some people get mad at, sort of thing. So anyways, that's a very long way of me saying that's basically what I know about this movie.
When's the last time you heard of an Oscar-nominated movie that nobody has actually seen? Other than...
well, it depends on what you mean. I mean, technically, I would say The Artist might be one of those movies where I was one of the only people who probably saw that movie in theaters. No, it's the silent film that they made back in
I haven't watched
2014 or whatever. Yeah. Let's do this, though. Instead of talking around it, let's find out what we actually think about this movie. Let's go watch it. I'll go thank some sponsors. And then when we return, we'll be talking about the Cider House Rules. Hey there, everyone. Kyle again, breaking into the episode to talk to you about some of our sponsors that help this show keep going. It is very early in the morning, which is why my voice sounds very, very deep. I'm very, very tired, but we need to thank these glorious institutions that, give us a little bit of coin to continue blabbing about films that were made 21 years ago. First and foremost, Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. The Alberta Podcast Network promotes and supports Alberta-made podcasts and connects their audiences with Alberta-based businesses and organizations. This episode of Kyle and Dave vs. the Machine is brought to you by CPA Alberta. It may be cliche to say by now, but we really are living in unprecedented times. That's why you should consider hiring a chartered professional accountant, also known as a CPA, to help guide you through this pandemic and jumpstart your recovery. With a CPA on your team, you can be confident you will find the best solutions to even your biggest business problems. CPAs are trained to dig in and truly understand how an organization operates, where it's already excelling, and how it can be better. For an inside look at how Alberta CPAs are supporting their clients through the pandemic, follow CPA Alberta on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. You can also visit cpalberta.ca to find out more. This episode is also brought to you by Park Power, a provider of electricity and natural gas in Alberta that offers low rates, awesome service, and profit sharing with local charities. So Park Power, they've been a long-time sponsor, but in Alberta, you get to choose who to buy your energy from. Park Power has low overhead, and chances are you'll save money if you switch. You can find out how much money you could save by visiting parkpower.ca and plugging your numbers into the Alberta Energy Savings Calculator. If you decide to switch, it's easy. Nothing changes about your service, only the price you pay. You can learn more at parkpower.ca. Well, I don't want to say it was a complete waste of my 2 hours, but it definitely was 2 hours that I spent watching a film. I want to know kind of quick, immediate thoughts, non-spoilery as possible. Alex, what are your immediate thoughts on the Cider House Rules?
I actually enjoyed it. It kind of felt a little bit meandery, but I liked that about it. I did get the sense, because I guess this is it. It's based off of a book, and I did get the sense that this is one of those movies where the book is better, and you can tell that by watching the movie. But I did enjoy it, and I just felt like it was very human. Everybody was flawed. Everybody was complicated. There wasn't really necessarily a hero or a villain. I thought, for what it was, I think they did a great job.
Alex, I'm so glad you're going to be on this podcast, because my sense is that myself and Dave are going to be super negative on this movie. So I agree with you in one sense, in that I have to assume that the book fills in a lot of gaps that I feel the movie has, that kind of makes it make a little bit more sense, because the meandering nature, as you mentioned, for me was a lot of like, I don't know what is actually happening or where this movie is even going to at this point. But let's talk about that a little bit more, because there's other films I was thinking that kind of do a similar thing that I love, and yet this one was something that I was like, I do not get what is going on.
To be fair, do you ever know what is going on?
Alex, you mentioned that there's these elements that you love. Was there a certain storyline or a moment that particularly stood out to you that you liked the most?
One thing that I think stood out to me is Tobey Maguire coming to the complicated realization of his relationship to the idea of abortion, just in general. I think that particular thing tracked really well with me, because as I've grown up, I've started exploring these gray areas and the complicated nature of everything. And I thought that did such a great job of teasing that out a little bit, at least, from my viewpoint, which was good, because I have roommates who also watch that and who have much more black and white views than I do. And they were even able to watch that and kind of be like, oh, okay, I think I'm starting to understand a bit more. So on that end, I think that was something I particularly enjoyed.
All right. Dave, what are your immediate thoughts on this film?
Well, I recently received feedback that I don't expound.
Whatever could you mean,
That I don't
Dave?
expound on my opinions a lot, and that once I have an opinion, I seem to just stick with it. So I'm going to try to explain myself that I didn't like this movie. Yeah, that's all I got.
Great.
No, I think when, meandering is such a apologetic word. It just doesn't know what it's doing. The surprising thing that you guys bring up with the book is that the author of the book wrote the screenplay for this movie. So,
He did, yes.
You can do a better job of adapting your own novel if you have a strong theme of what you're trying to communicate, and I didn't pick it up. Clearly, abortion, I don't know if we're spoiling it, is a big current.
I mean, it's talked about literally within the first 10 minutes,
so we'll
I
stay
think
with
it's
that.
okay to talk that generally that's what this movie is about.
So that's there, but I didn't think it's tackled head on, and I think that it just, I don't know, I thought it got lost, frankly, in a lot of, not fluff, just confusion, and there were certainly startling moments. I think we were startled. I don't know about you, but I felt startled. I don't know how many times I can say startled before it stops being startling.
You've almost reached your quota.
Well, I think what it was is that to spoil the eventual conclusion to this episode, I also did not like this movie very much, but I also was never bored with this movie. It was consistently being like, I was not expecting that to happen. And it was like, I wasn't expecting that to happen. And then I wasn't expecting that to happen. So like, I was never, if we look back at some of the other films we've watched here in this season, something we constantly bring up is Message in a Bottle, right? A movie that is rightly forgotten into the dustbin of history because that is straight up boring for 2.5 hours of like, oh my gosh, just let this movie end. And this, I never felt that. I was like, I don't actually know how this movie's going to wrap up. And I'm very interested to know how it wraps up because I literally could not tell you if we turn this off now, how this is going to resolve itself.
Yeah, it's no Message in a Bottle. That's for sure.
Yeah. Where I agree with you, Dave, is that I think for me, it's a little confused about what it wants to be and what it's really trying to say. I think that there's like these 4 different things that's all trying to comment on, and I never felt that one thing led into the other to a satisfying theme. And I think there is. I think that's what is so annoying to me is that I can see it. I can see where maybe a more talented filmmaker, or if maybe John Irving had given it to a different writer where he wasn't so close to it, where they could have made those connections a little bit more concretely about, how abortion and going off to war and adoption.
You're just spoiling it now.
I guess
You're
the
spoiling
concept
it.
of
You're spoiling it. Now nobody's going to go watch this movie now.
And that's fine. I'm not saying anything is.
Okay.
I mean, that's fine. But I mean, all of these concepts are put in there. Even like race relations is kind of talked about a little bit.
Oh yeah.
But all of it felt like, here is Oscar bait the movie. So we're just going to do all of these topics in one film and throw it at you, and then it's up to you to decide about what you feel about this. So I never felt like there was certain things that were earned.
I'm still not sure if you liked the movie or not.
However, I think we should have a deeper conversation about this in spoilers, where we can really delve into all of those topics. So before we get there, let's talk about some of the backstory to this movie. Let me tell you this. The Cider House Rules was released on December 10th, 1999, and that is a date we've already said on this podcast because that was the same day that The Green Mile was released. Written and directed by Frank Darabont, starring Tom Hanks, Michael Clark Duncan, David Morrison, Doug Hutchison. And as you might remember from that episode that we've already released, it was also the day that the great film classic Deuce Bigalow Male Gigolo was released, which was written by Harris Goldberg and Rob Schneider, directed by Mike Mitchell, starring Rob Schneider, William Forsythe, and Eddie Griffin.
We've already talked about Oscar snubs, so...
I know, there we go. This is where, as we said, me and Dave are on the minority opinion here on this podcast because it is currently rated 7.4 on IMDb. It has a 75 on Metacritic. And on Rotten Tomatoes, from 112 critics, it is rated 71%. And from 53,498 users, it is rated 77%.
Fools, all of them.
So it is definitely a very positively thought of film.
No, I refuse to believe those numbers. Clearly manipulated by the producer of this film.
Its budget was $24 million. Which I feel like is a steal based on the acting talent they have in this film, that it was only $24 million.
Okay, we keep bringing it up, but if Runaway Bride is $60 million.
Yeah, I know.
$60 million.
The fact that this was made for 24.
60.
It opened,
60.
it must have had a very limited release because it opened to $110,000. But domestically, it would go on to make $57 million, internationally $31, which brings it to a total of $88 million, or with inflation, that's $138 million. So it made a tidy profit. Like, this was a successful movie as far as box office goes. Its plot description from IMDb is a boy who communicates with spirits.
Wow.
No, it's not. That is from the...
Wow, we just did that.
That's from The Sixth Sense from last
I think
week.
you're seeing dead people.
So let me tell you what the actual... That is so hilarious. I did not update
wait,
my
I think I watched the wrong movie.
I was going to say, I was reading like, wait a second. No, that doesn't seem right. A boy who interacts with spirits has an abortion.
Oh, wow.
You
got to leave that in the cut, because if that doesn't get us some listeners, I don't know what will.
Yeah. Its plot description from IMDb is actually a compassionate young man raised in an orphanage and trained to be a doctor there decides to leave to see the world. Which again is I guess sort of what this movie is
No,
about,
it's
but
Not a great description.
it's not a great description. No. It stars Tobey Maguire as Homer Wells, Charlize Theron as Candy Kendall, Michael Caine as Dr. Wilbur Larch, and Delroy Lindo as Mr. Rose. Anything we want to say about those actors specifically?
Yeah, my research yields that Tobey Maguire is an asshole.
I love assholes.
Just unapologetically.
Yeah,
It's crazy is so he is the one of the main antagonists in the Molly's Game true story.
Right.
And some of the stories,
But they don't actually name him by name.
yeah,
I don't
Michael
think, in
Cera
that.
plays him as Player X or whatever. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's an anecdotal story by Molly that he's a piece of shit. And when he was on a downturn, I guess the whole game is feeding him air quote whales. Apparently he's a sore loser and a sore winner. So when he finally turned it around, I think he won $1 million. He like put it in everybody's face, and then he was going to tip her $100,000 chip, and he told her to bark like a seal for the money. Bark like a seal.
Yikes.
Yeah, he's gross. And then the other thing about that, which is, I don't want to bag too much on this, but when he found out that she was actually making money, through this poker setup, he got angry about it and apparently started his own private celebrity poker game to take her clients away. That's like, there's a reason why this guy doesn't make movies anymore. He's apparently just a piece of shit. So
yeah, I can't even tell you what the last movie he was in.
Brothers,
was.
I think I saw, but I didn't watch it.
But from like 8 years ago?
2013, yeah. He's close.
Alex, what is your interpretation of Tobey Maguire? Like, what do you know him from other than this movie, of course?
The Spider-Man movies.
Yeah. MTV's Best Kiss.
That's all. That's all I know him of. So I this is the first time learning of it. Congratulations, Dave. You're enlightening me.
I feel great because it's fun to crush people's dreams. Well, here's the thing, Alex. When we hypothetically watched this last night and not right now in the context of this podcast, just as we were approaching the digital video disc player, Kyle and my wife Helen both voiced their opinion that Tobey Maguire was super gross. And I was the apologetic one. It's like, Spider-Man's awesome. And Kyle said, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man's suck. So we were already fighting before the movie started. But doing some research, I was wrong.
I
was wrong.
I am in a bit of the minority opinion there too, because I know there's a lot of love for the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. I am one of those obnoxious, like, I don't know, white nerds who's like, not my Spider-Man. Like, that's basically what I say. Tobey Maguire was actually a pretty decent Peter Parker. I just don't think he was a good Spider-Man. And I know that's a weird thing to say. Andrew Garfield, for me, was the exact opposite. He was a great Spider-Man, but an awful Peter Parker. It's like, this pretty boy is not Peter Parker. He's too good looking to be Peter Parker.
Sure.
And then I think what's his face? The new guy, Tom Holland.
Tom Holland
is like the perfect match of the two, where he's a good, quippy Spider-Man, and he's a conceivable, like, dorky, nerdy kid. That's me on my high horse about, like, I guess Spider-Man 2 is fine, but it's not like the second coming like a lot of people try and tell me it is.
Wow. No bitterness there. Yeah, no emotion. That was
no bitterness.
Pure fact and rationality.
Just, if it makes you feel any better, just imagine me watching Spider-Man 3 with my arms crossed and being like,
well, I think that's how everybody watched Spider-Man 3. I'm pretty sure.
I was like that for the first Spider-Man 2. I was like, no.
And then Willem Dafoe in it.
That's how you can tell that I am the worst type of critic, because even though I wasn't a huge fan of the first Spider-Man, I still went and saw the other two in theaters.
Spider-Man 2 is great. All right, we'll stop this before we start punching each other on Zoom.
That's what I've been waiting for since episode 1.
I mean, Charlize Theron is great. I mean, I think she could conceivably, like, realistically, could beat me up, like, right now.
Well,
I have no...
Do you know a little bit about her backstory? So...
Not, other than she's from South Africa, that's about the only thing I know.
Her mom killed her dad. Would you like to hear this story?
I guess, because that's going to be more interesting than the movie.
So, So apparently, she grew up fairly poor in South Africa. I can't remember if they're farmers or industrial something. I can't remember that. But her dad was an abusive alcoholic. And so when she was growing up, I think she's an only child, this guy would be cruel to the mom and to the daughter, to the point where one day he shot a gun at them And
Wow.
apparently her mom also had a gun and shot him to death and was exonerated of all charges because of self-defense and because the guy's a piece of crap. But apparently this is, so I revealed this to Helen and she's like, oh yeah. She opened about in an interview about that a couple years ago.
I'm
How
sure
the
she
fuck-
did.
Yeah.
I guess I don't watch those interviews,
No,
so
I
that's
don't either.
wild.
Wow.
And the other thing that I thought was fascinating about her is, I mean, this is just sort of surface level research, but so she came to America to be a dancer, I guess, got hurt. When she went to LA, she was so poor, she apparently stole bread to eat, like some Jean Valjean shit.
Jean Valjean, I was
Yeah.
going to say.
Yeah.
24601 over here.
And,
Charlize Theron.
yeah, luckily she didn't meet her Javert. Now we're just going to look like total losers.
All right. Okay. From the top, we're going to sing Les Mis.
Valjean at last. No, and so the story of her discovery is that she was at a bank and couldn't cash checks like for her survival. And as she's flipping out and arguing with the bank teller, a talent agent happens to be the person behind her, cashes the check for her, gives her a card, and tells her to come and become part of Hollywood. This is fascinating. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's really interesting. I know she's had her run-in with, I don't think it was Harvey Weinstein, but a producer like that. I remember listening to this on Howard Stern, actually, of her like having to make a choice, like, do I do this thing he's asking me or do I say no? And she said no and
yeah, there's
walked out of the
something,
room.
I got it, that specific anecdote didn't come up, but there's something about her making the choice to not be typecast as the bimbo and looking solely to, you know, work her way into acting. I mean, I think it helps that she's so beautiful that she got so many opportunities to do that, because if you look at her sort of CV, a lot of actresses wouldn't even got the opportunity to be in such a variety of roles. And she does everything, man. She does comedy, drama, action.
I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I mean, like, Michael Caine is Michael Caine. I think, I mean, started in Alfie years and years and years ago, has had this extensive career, has won a couple of Oscars. Basically, Christopher Nolan loves him because he's in every single Christopher Nolan movie. If you can find it, because it's super hard to find on streaming, the movie Sleuth, the original Sleuth, not the remake they made in the 2000s, him and Laurence Olivier, and it's a great movie. I love it a lot. And then Delroy Lindo, if you have not seen the Netflix movie The Five Bloods from Spike Lee yet, definitely check it out because he gives a phenomenal performance, I think, in that movie. But he was also Malcolm X, and he's been in a bunch of movies
he's
over the last like 40 years.
Yeah, Delroy don't fuck around. I like him.
Yeah.
Well, we will talk about this movie, but
right. I mean, I don't think he's at fault for this
no,
movie.
no,
I think
I
it's
know.
the script.
But yeah, you know, it's like the Sam Neill thing. Event Horizon ruined Sam Neill for me. I could never look at him as a human being after he became
Not
Satan.
even Jurassic Park? Come on.
It's weird to watch him now. I just feel like he's going to take me to the other side. It creeps me out. Creeps me out, man.
This movie was written by John Irving based on his novel of the same name. As far as I can tell, this is his only screenplay that he's ever written, although a few of his other books have also been adapted into becoming films, the two big ones being The World According to Garp and Simon Birch. His other books include A Prayer to Owen Meany, A Widow for 1 Year, and Avenue of Mysteries. So if you're into bestseller lists and stuff like that, you have probably heard of John Irving before. By the way, before I forget, something I forgot to record here. This movie is available on DVD or Blu-ray. You can buy it on iTunes, and that is it.
Don't do
There's
that.
no streaming option for the Cider House Rules in Canada.
Libraries are free. Libraries are free.
Libraries are your friend in this case. This movie was directed by, I think you say it, Lasse Hallström.
You watched your
that's
version,
that's a
right?
guess.
Yeah.
That is a guess on how to actually pronounce his name. And boy, Dave, did you look at his career? Because it is a doozy. He started doing TV episodes and then directed seemingly every single ABBA music video ever. I counted 33, including ABBA the movie that came out in 1977.
What?
That is where he started. I don't take that information how you will.
He's the Swedish Spike Jonze.
He made a few films in the 80s, but he really came to prominence with What's Eating Gilbert Grape in 1993. And then he'd go on to make this movie, Chocolat. I believe is how you say it. Chocolat. Instead of chocolate. The Shipping News and Casanova. And in recent years, he's done Salmon Fishing in the Yemen, A Dog's Purpose, which may be one of the worst films of all time, and a movie in 2018 called The Nutcracker and the Four Realms. No idea what that is. There are no upcoming films for him. So that's Lars Hallström, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. Someone send me like a pronunciation guide so I can actually say his name properly. Does anyone have anything to talk about like his like previous films? I think the only one I've actually seen is What's Eating Gilbert Grape.
I've only ever seen the Cider House Rules from him. And I have heard of the Nutcracker and the Four Realms.
Finally, a man of culture.
Tell me what it's about.
Yeah, I have no idea, but I remember hearing about it. I may have seen a trailer back when it was coming out, but other than that, I know nothing about him. This is the only movie I've ever seen.
What's Eating Gilbert Grape was a big one. That was Leo's first Oscar, right? Or nomination?
Oscar nomination, yes.
Where he plays a mentally disabled fella. I wonder if that would hold up in today's cancel culture.
To be on, I don't know. The only thing I really remember is it being Johnny Depp being like super reserved. Like it's not the Johnny Depp we know nowadays. Like he's like super reserved, like no weirdness going on.
Flowing hair, standing by an old pickup truck.
I hate, exactly. And I hate to say it this way, but like, I mean, it's in the movie. The big fat mother that they have to get a crane to get her out of the house with. Yeah. But like, that's the two things I remember about that movie is basically those. Okay, let's get into spoilers here now.
That was the correct pause.
I know. That was Alex, correct. Yeah. Alex, I'm going to throw it to you. What do you think this movie is about?
I don't know if, okay, so I actually, after watching this, I considered listening to the audiobook before coming onto the show, just so that I could kind of get a little bit more perspective. And so I go on Audible, and it's 24 hours long. God. And I'm like, no wonder, because that's almost as long as the entire Narnia series on Audible, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought, no wonder I watched this and thought, okay, the book must be better and really tease out these conversations they're having here. But I'm like, I don't have time to listen to that whole audiobook before we record.
Well, especially because we just watched this movie.
We just watched it. And I was like, no time for that.
Listen at 24 speed. It would have been okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'm like, give me an hour. I'll be right back. I just want to freshen up here. So what is it about?
Yes, that's what I
just cut it there and the episode's over.
So if I had to say something, which I guess I'm on a podcast, so I might have to, I would say it's about people and how complicated people are and how everybody makes stupid decisions. Everybody makes good decisions, maybe decisions they think are stupid though. And that's one thing that I really appreciated about it, is that the world is complicated. Life is complicated.
Robots are complicated.
And sometimes, just like this movie, there isn't necessarily a purpose, and it can still be enjoyable.
Yeah. Does that track for you, Dave?
No. There's so many moments like where we could just cut off. Like Kyle, that was a great and a pause. So I guess the positive is that it's not message in a bottle. So I didn't want to turn off. I didn't fall asleep, and there was minimal groaning. There was definitely a lot of quizzical looks because I think the movie struggles to find a tone. You know, we start off with this very long, drawn-out, idealistic orphanage painting where everybody's fucking happy and it's off-putting to start. To be honest, in an incredibly offensive racist way, I was so put off by Michael Caine speaking Americana because I just I was really caught off guard with that.
You're not supposed to sound like that.
Yeah, just like where's my Michael Caine? No, that's awful. And so,
by the way, I should point out, I think he's trying to be Irish in this film.
Really?
Oh,
I think that's what
I thought,
because it says his mother is Irish, didn't he?
Yeah, he had an Irish backstory, but it sounded like it was supposed to be him. I mean, why else give him an Oscar? I don't even. That's the other thing that was in the back of my mind. We just watched Sixth Sense, and it was just upsetting Like I like Michael Caine, but how the fuck did Haley Joel Osment?
He did win Best Supporting Actor for this
frustrating.
role. So,
and then as they casually get into the as aforementioned abortion storyline, I thought, oh well, here's a nice theme, and then they just don't give a fuck about it for about 45 minutes, an hour. And then, Kyle, if you remember, as it develops, we were both sitting there like, well, he's going to perform an abortion because that's just...
Which we were right.
Yeah.
It just how we got there was like not expected.
Psychotic. Yeah, and you get slapped in the face a couple of times. But even those slaps in the face, they're so jarring because they're, to your point, Alex, if it's a 24-hour read, and actually to Kyle's point, if you have someone who's so close to what he intended the book to be about, probably the worst choice for screenplay, because he's probably running those backstories in his head and not thinking about whether they can or ought to be expressed in a 2-hour format. But
well, because that's the thing, right? Because screenwriting and novel writing are very different skill sets, where you can be, have this, extended sequence of like beautiful language and telling backstory, and in a movie it really has to be very visual, like all this stuff that's fitting into place, or have people being super pedantic and like literally just explicitly telling you what the film or what is going on in the film. And I feel like this film felt like it expected people to understand what happened between the cuts. Yeah, because there's a scene actually at the very near the beginning, where when Paul Rudd and Charlize Theron show up, and they basically say like, "Oh, are you performing this procedure?" And they're like, "Okay, we're going to take you to the next room now." Next scene cuts, and it's like Tobey Maguire walking into a room, thinking, and it feels like that's just a progression from that last scene, but actually it's been like a fast forward of, I don't know, a day or like at least 12 hours or something like that. And she's like being wheeled out of the procedure. I'm like, whoa, like there's like whiplash, because it's like, it's cut together in such a weird way that things, to me, just don't feel like they're fitting with each other. It literally feels like, okay, we're just going to cut out portions of time just so we can go through the story beats of this novel that we're adapting to the screen. To come back, though, to what I was saying before about theme, honestly, this is what I came up with eventually. And I think this is what the movie is striving for, and I don't think it actually succeeds, in my opinion, which is, I think Alex is right, and it's setting up this idea that, hey, everyone is flawed. There's not necessarily easy answers to everything in life. Cool, I'm on board with that. But then it houses a lot of that theme in lying for the greater good. And in some situations, I'm like, okay, like I get it. There is times to lie because you're protecting a person, or because you don't want evil things to happen to someone that you love.
How about if I spend my time wishing evil things on others?
And at other times, it was like, so am I supposed to feel sorry for this guy who raped his daughter? Like, I don't understand where even the film is coming down on the idea of that. And then it's like at the end, like the character that Michael Caine is playing, I feel is like a shade away from being a total psychopath, because it's like, I'm going to pretend that Tobey Maguire is an actual doctor. I'm going to forge all these papers. I'm going to ether myself to death. And I'm just going to have him come over here and take over because he likes these kids more than anyone else. I'm
like, done out of love, Kyle. It's done out of love.
Yes, but it's like, and all I'm thinking is like, but he's still not a doctor. Like, I don't, like, it feels so weird to me that that they're allowing this to happen. And like, literally, like the two nurses are like, well, I'm glad he's back here at the orphanage. I'm like, but are you? Because I don't know. It all felt so weird to me. I don't know. What is your rebuttal to that, Alex?
Rebuttal.
I don't know.
You have the floor.
No,
is this a debate?
No, I just want to make sure that it's not me and Dave like crapping on this movie for like an hour.
I'm just waiting for my turn.
Obviously, rape is always wrong. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I think you're not meant to feel bad for him, because I did not feel bad for him. But I think it's supposed to show you like how complicated people are, and how the things that we do and the desires that we have can be in such conflict. And I think obviously they used a very extreme example in this movie, but I think that helps to paint that picture and to show like, yeah, this is not like, life is not simple. It's not just like this man is just purely bad. He also has good intentions and good feelings and good thoughts, and he cares about people, but he does evil things. And I think you can fit anybody that you meet on that spectrum. That's the way that I read into it, is that you're not meant to feel sorry for him. You're meant to appreciate that people are complicated. Even the bad people are complicated.
Looking up the time period where this is all written, this post-Second World War existentialist line of thinking, which was the reflection, like you said, Alex, that morality and ethics and all this stuff was not black and white, and everything got thrown out, particularly in the Second World War for our generation, because not even just the Holocaust in general is of course culture forming, but the proliferation of wartime photography, of writing to show what it was like to be a soldier, murdering your brothers, sisters, people that you know, et cetera, et cetera. I think that in its intent, if we were to imply that what they wanted to show was this complexity of humanity, so for example, everything from Michael Caine committing forgery, conning everybody, and just being a general fucking psychopath.
That's my kind of guy.
To daughter rapist, Delroy Lindo redeeming himself with some Harry Carey, seppuku stuff at the end. I think there might be a theme that was worth exploring. It doesn't translate for me visually. It seems apologetic. It seems like there's this sense where Kyle and I were discussing where the way they wrap up each of the storylines, you're like, well, at least the good guy won, and Tobey Maguire is not a good guy. He also is like a sociopath the whole way. Like there's nothing redeeming for me in the way he portrays whatever this weird Homer. Even the implication that he would be named after someone going on an odyssey, air quotes, is a little frustrating because that should have been a 6-hour movie with like...
It's a very writer thing to do, by the way.
Right. And so, if it's a 24-hour read, and this story actually involves 60 stops and so many tests and so many reflections on different scenarios, I mean, that's one thing. But in a 2-hour movie, to just suddenly throw a knife fight out of the blue, suddenly throw a rape in your face, suddenly throw you're just like, what is... I just felt frustrated.
I think actually you're hitting on something. I'm curious if you think the same thing with this, Alex. There's a criticism I level at certain movies occasionally. It's not one I do all the time, because most of the time I think movies are too long. That's usually my criticism for a lot of films. And there's occasionally movies where like, oh man, I think this movie was actually too short because it needed time to like breathe. And I think you're hitting on something that I think this is why I was so frustrated with this, is because it is structured like an Odyssey, but not filmed like one. It doesn't feel like he's going on a quest to understand the world more. It feels like he is literally, and I think, to be mean a bit here, I think it's actually Tobey Maguire's acting that is throwing me off, because I don't think he's a very good actor. Sorry. If there was someone more that could be that foil for the audience to bring us into that, where he's experiencing this world and he's maneuvering around it, more like a Forrest Gump who could go through different world events and feel like, hey, I'm going along on this ride, I think I would have been along for that more. And I think having this be a little bit longer would have been able to make it breathe. So, I'm asking for a lot here. Better actor and a little bit longer for it to stretch out.
Better direction.
Better direction. I think it would be more like, we talked about Eyes Wide Shut here recently, right? And I was like, oh man, like a 2.5 hour long movie. Like, I don't know. But for me, for that movie, you really feel it with Tom Cruise. You need it to be that length to really feel like he is A, going insane, but B, that he has gone on a journey over that one night. Because we almost are feeling like we're in real time at certain points. And that's, I think, what I needed from this movie a little bit more, is to feel that journey that he's on, rather than it just being random things that are happening out of the blue and like stone-faced actor in front of me. Anyways, that's me, I think, being more mean than I should be. But that's how I feel.
Well, I get what you're saying, though. The plot description that you read out, it's like, man leaves orphanage, to go and travel the world or whatever it said. And it's like, no, man leaves orphanage halfway through the movie to go to another place in the same state.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and
it's not
and
even
I
the
can
world.
get
Yeah, that's right.
You know, yeah, like it's he doesn't go exploring. I can appreciate the idea that, you know, he's exploring himself, right? And, you know, whatever poetic thing you want to pad onto there to justify the synopsis. But it did feel like they had this huge 1 hour thing. I thought the orphanage was called the Cider House.
Right.
Thank you.
Like,
exactly.
So this is so weird to me. It's
Exactly.
like I thought that was the cider house, and then when they halfway through the movie, I'm like, oh no, wait, this is the cider
He
house.
goes
that
into
they're
a
in.
Yeah, I was
literal
like-
cider house, and you're like, I
Yeah.
don't
I'm like, wait, they're leaving. What?
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
yeah.
I also think that the actual rules of the cider house, which by the way, says more about me. I've always like interpreted the movie's title wrong because I thought it was like the cider house. It rules. That's what I always thought that this
like it rules.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
But it's more like, no, there's actually rules that are written down inside of the cider house. Anyways, what the most anticlimactic reveal?
Don't fall off a roof. Yeah.
Like the four ones on the left hand side. Like, okay, so they're just don't go on the roof. I guess was the
Don't eat
the
on
thing? I
it.
don't
Don't
know.
sleep on it. Don't walk on it. What the fuck
I felt
was
like
that?
that should have been more thematically resonant if you're going to name your movie after the Cider House Rules.
Like, yeah,
that the rules should be important in some way.
That was the big thing that got me thinking that the book must be better, because I
Has to be,
figured
yeah.
the book must have this as a continuous theme, as like a huge theme throughout it, instead of this like, oh, we don't read him because we didn't write him. And then later on in the movie, he's like, let's throw him out.
It's like, I guess.
I mean, none of us have read the book, but if he had used the four lines of the roof as metaphors for the storylines that Homer experiences, and at the end you're like, oh, well, he did eat on a roof and got diarrhea or something, and you're like, he shouldn't have done that.
did.
I mean, that's one thing, but
Yeah, he shouldn't have slept on that roof or walked on that roof or ate on that roof.
nobody was, until after they read the rule, there wasn't a single person on a roof. It's such a stupid rule. Yeah.
Before I forget to about like the journey off into the world, maybe it's just because I don't know the geography of Maine all that much, but it also felt like he just went like 2 hours away. Like it wasn't like this huge quest to get to wherever he was. Anyways, that's kind of like a side point.
Until the end where like he drives to the port town, but then he's got to get a drive and a long train back, which I thought was a really weird cut. I had no idea he was going back to the orphanage in that I thought he was just I think that would have been a better ending if he had, like, if they needed him back, but then he went on his way, because the way they were shooting that train scene, you're like, he made his own decision, and then he didn't. He just went back and yeah, he became an unlicensed doctor performing unlicensed abortions in a state where it was illegal. But it's okay because Michael Caine had impeccable calligraphy, so it was going to be all right.
Sounds to me like everything came up fake roses. Perfect ending.
So we have to address this too. And I say this as someone who is fairly to the left, like politically. Boy, did I feel talked down to for this entire movie. It felt really, I don't know.
Heavy-handed.
Heavy-handed is a good answer to that. To stuff that I even agree with, I'm like, okay, guys, like, back off a little bit here with like, it felt to me, and I said this to Dave, if we had watched it last night, I said to him, this feels like a Reddit post to me. Like someone wrote a Reddit post and there's like rebuttals back and forth underneath it. Like they used that framing device a little bit of like the letters being sent back and forth, but like, I'm never performing an abortion because it's always wrong. And it's like, well, sometimes you never know what can happen. And then they literally have the example that every single person that is pro-choice says, like, well, how about rape and incest? Well, let's just mash those two together and present it to our like main character. And again, I agree that in this case, like, the woman should be able to choose to have that. But it was just like, I don't know. It felt like the Liberal Party, the movie, our thoughts on abortion. Like, that's what it felt like to me a little bit. I'm like, all right, even though I do agree with it, I don't know if anyone else feels the same way.
It's interesting that you say that, because hypothetically, as Dave said earlier, I watched it the other night with my roommate, and they're pretty open people, understanding people. but probably more conservative leaning or right leaning, at least morality wise, than I am. Or I guess I should put that in air quotes, morality wise.
I was going to say, what have you been doing?
Yeah, I'm like, well, I don't know.
He's been at those masked parties from Eyes Wide Shut. It's great.
While we are streaming live on YouTube right now, you can't see this, but Alex is like just smoking a stogie, like drinking like whiskey, and actually performing an abortion right now. It's
draped
really weird.
Draped in surfs. Yeah,
I'm very talented. But yeah, so the folks that I watched it with are a lot less left leaning than Kyle is, and certainly than I am, and I'm assuming David as well. And so they actually took it pretty well. So it's interesting that you watched it and thought, well, okay, like you're just kind of saying stuff here. But they actually, the sense that I got from it was that it was a really good way to introduce the subject and introduce the topic and the complexity of it.
Sure.
And I think part of the reason that worked is that there were other themes. There were other things happening. It wasn't just like, this is our one hill that we're dying on. And so that's kind of my rebuttal. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. I guess I hadn't thought of that before, of like taking a really hard topic and then couching it behind like other storylines to make it a little bit more palatable. I think maybe that's what it is, because I'm already there. It's just like, I get it, guys. Like, enough of this. How about you, Dave? Do you feel that way? Or
I'm woke. I don't need this.
I'm woke. I'm what the kids say awoke AF. So I think I know a little thing about.
I got this. No, I obviously, Alex, you have you're in the trenches, right? I mean, you're not in a necessarily such a combative state that you're in, but if you're watching,
Alex, you're in a holy war, right?
If you're watching it in America,
that's exactly right.
Yeah, if you're watching it in America, those the terms are different than in Canada. I mean, especially right now in Alberta, it turns out we've got quite a lot of right-leaning, white supremacist, religious fucking nutcases running around here too. But America is very weird in its polarization. So, I mean, that's one thing. So, I think if you're watching it with some folks that are either on the fence or leaning one way, and they're able to consume it and actually have some type of discussion without ignoring it, that's quite a powerful statement to how this plays out. I didn't even realize, honestly, that this movie was trying to tell me something about the morality of abortion. When Kyle's bringing up the letters, I had already zoned out. I had no idea what the content of their letter exchange was. I actually and sort of interpret it as sort of this surrogate father-son coming of age shit, where it's like, you should go here. I don't want to. I'm my own man, like that sort of stuff. I didn't actually pick up at all that there were going to go that way. It is heavy-handed in my mind, just in the sense that it's so truncated in all of the storylines that when they need to show you something, like the knife fight comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like what?
Well, that's the thing. Like,
just like, I think, did that happen? I mean, wow.
I think you can kind of piece together like the why behind that later on.
Sure, but
do like supreme subtext, but it's like, I agree. It's like literally we're watching this movie and then all of a sudden like they're knife fighting. I'm like, whoa, what is happening in this movie?
And not just like a gritty one. They made them into ninjas and talking about how he's never, his hands are so fast. This is why you don't fuck with this guy, and you're like, so he's killed someone before. Like there's something about this environment.
Well, even when they come back, they're like, he didn't know. How does he phrase that? It's like
he didn't know what his business was.
Oh, right. He didn't know what his business was. Like, so he like for sure killed him, right?
Yeah,
like that's like for sure that's what they're talking about, that they killed him, right? Like that's what we felt.
Oh man. The other thing that kind of bothers me, that's heavy-handed, and this is sort of probably the product of our age and time, is and I'm sorry to say this on this interview, but the whitewashing and white savior shit in this movie is very off-putting.
Stop being racist, Dave.
Alex, if they had kept it like I thought and you did in the microcosm of the orphanage, and this is shot in 99 and there are no black or minority characters in it, I mean, that's basically every movie in Hollywood for a long period of time. That's one thing. But the moment he goes to this orchard and then he enters the house with the migrant workers. I mean, my eyes were rolling fucking pretty hard at that point because you knew that he would become this moral center and he was going to teach them the ways of like right and wrong, that he was going to be impervious to corruption. It was frustrating because, and again, maybe this is a Tobey Maguire thing, but I couldn't get over this idea that I knew exactly that he would play this role of savior, and it's annoying. It's really annoying for me to watch. I don't know if I wouldn't have watched as I didn't in 1999, and it probably wouldn't have been an issue at that time at all, other than within the minority groups who are looking for representation. But right now, it plays weird, man. I didn't enjoy watching Tobey Maguire calmly go and save Erykah Badu's life.
The last thing, I guess, like as far as themes and stuff go, is the aspect of, I think, lying that gets brought up in this movie consistently. And to different effects, right? You have like Michael Caine telling the Kieran Culkin kid to be like, don't tell the other kids like what is actually happening here. Like, let them live in their fantasy world. And I have to interpret that to mean like every kid eventually crosses that threshold at the orphanage where it's like, I'm keeping you in this fantasy world as long as I can until I show you what's really happening here. You have people lying to themselves, people lying to other characters. I think that they're people lying to the government. So I think there's this undercurrent of like knowing when to lie. Again, this is where it gets muddied for me a little bit because I don't even know where the movie falls on this question. But I think it's there. I think it's trying to have this argument about not all lying is good, but sometimes lying is necessary. I don't know if anyone has anything to extrapolate on that.
I mean, we lie about a lot of things. And I think there's always the temptation to say that, you know, you should be absolutely honest and everything. But then you can just easily bring up the example of, oh, what if you're harboring Jews and the SS come by, right? Like, and then it's very quickly like, oh, well, maybe I should lie sometimes, right? And I don't know. I don't think there's any easy answer for that. And I think you can pick through this movie and pick which lie is maybe a necessary lie and which lie is good and, you know, what fits where. I think you could spend a whole podcast choosing each one and saying, well, that was a bad idea. That was a good idea. That was a bad idea. But I think that'd be a waste of time.
We can't do that because we don't have a 24-hour podcast. And the other thing, you know what I would like to see, you know, the ideal in a bubble, in a pure sense, is that one ought never to lie. And then, yeah, we have learned that is not strictly the case. It would have been nice if this movie maybe had been a trilogy to play that out in such a way that if you lie, then you need to be in a position where you accept the consequences of that lie, for good or for evil, because good and evil, at least for me, are human concepts. So, you know, if Michael Caine, you know, forges this document to have a self-trained successor who really shouldn't be there in a academic or procedural or whatever manner, shouldn't we see that is going to cause Tobey Maguire problems in his life? That, you know, that is not okay to finish that movie and say that he did it because he loved you, that he lied to you about your heart, that he did all of these things for the better good. You can't end that story there. There have to be greater. Even the Delroy Lindo, you know, killing himself, it felt, instead of being a wider moral discussion about maybe retribution and seeking some type of balance, it's so hurried. And he's talking about just like gutting himself so that his daughter can get away, even though he impregnated her. Like it's too quick. It's too ugly. You know, with the death of, is it Jack, the other, the picker who don't fit in? You know, you could have played that rape abortion storyline with that dude, and it didn't have to be necessary. I mean, I thought that's where it was going to go. And to get that,
me too.
Yeah, gut punch that it was going to be the dad. I didn't know if it was necessary, unless you're going to make it into a wider spectrum where maybe there were other characters that were performing illicit, like maybe Paul Rudd and Charlize Theron were not a couple. I mean, that could have been an interesting parallel where you get, not to rewrite it, but, you know, if you have something with complexity where everybody's lying and you see, you know, in this case, because they had ill intent, then it's worse, or they weren't willing to take the repercussion. I mean, you can have philosophical conversations about the role of language and how we communicate, but this movie felt like a justification that you can say whatever you want as long as it's done out of love and the American dream and supporting your family. It's like, fuck off. That's absolutely not true. Yeah.
I do like the idea of this being a trilogy, or you could call it the Cider, the House, the Rules.
Well, that's why Chronicles of Narnia didn't work. But
yeah, that's right. Okay, I just want to go through some very quick things here to wrap this up. Number one, I am convinced that Charlize Theron and Paul Rudd on this very movie made a blood pact to never age. Because, my goodness, maybe not so much Charlize Theron, she looks very young in this movie, but Paul Rudd looks exactly like he does 21 years later. He's 50-something now, and he still looks that good. It's not fair, is what I'm trying to say.
I'm pretty sure in Ant-Man, they draw in the wrinkles, just so that you don't realize he's a vampire.
I like seeing J.K. Simmons for like the 2 minutes he's in this film with no lines, like no lines whatsoever.
Oh, he's a lobster man. He's a lobster man.
When he first popped in, we're like, oh, J.K. Simmons is in this, cool, and then he's like in a montage.
Yeah, that's it.
No lines. We're like, what?
Weirdly enough,
there's got to be a deleted scene somewhere.
Weirdly enough, his scene dragged. So,
oh, come on. We have to mention that two things. One, that Tobey Maguire tried to eat Charlize Theron's face, which was the fucking
It was
strangest.
a very aggressive sex scene, and it was very off-putting to me.
Actually, it makes you wonder if maybe there was originally in the book something that was supposed to parallel some of these other, because that was gross. And when they left the forest, she wasn't pleased with his performance. No. She looked like it didn't go well.
Kyle is very used to that expression on people's faces.
And then there's a part where he's trying to console her on the wharf and she pushes him away. And I joked to Kyle, that's probably like an improv because she's so grossed up by this dude. She's like, no, fuck off. And they're like, we're keeping it. No, we're keeping that. That looked great. Yeah.
By the way, at the risk of oversharing, I'm so sorry to do this, but I know that for a lot of people, it's a fantasy of theirs to have sex like outside or out in the woods. And I can tell you, all it is dirt, ants, and leaves. And it's disgusting.
The mulch.
Don't do it. Oh, just don't do it. It's like the fucking worst.
The sweet.
I'm just saying.
That's what I was thinking when that scene happened. I'm like, you're not that far from the car. Just like, just
like
go
right there.
just mosey on over.
We're done here.
The machine has told us that we do need to wrap up here. First things first, we do need to rate this movie like we do every movie. If you want to see our full entire list of movies that we have rated, all 44 of them, you can head on over to our Letterboxd page, letterboxd.com/KDVSTM. KDVSTM, by the way, is also where you can find us on Twitter and on Instagram. But we first need to rate this movie. Alex, I say this to every guest, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart, and I'm sorry I have to say it this way.
No, you're not.
Your rating does not matter. But if you were to rate this movie out of 5, what do you think you would give it?
Solid 4.
Wow. Yeah. You can see me and Dave like shocked at that statement.
4.
Okay.
I was going to give it a 5 just to spite you guys.
Oh, wow.
But
Oh, no.
I was like, no,
this is not a perfect movie.
I feel like a 4.
All right. So, Dave, out of 5, what would you rate this movie?
Not a 4. What's the opposite of a 4? Like a 1? I think one's a little vindictive. I mean, there was a random knife fight. And like you said, I didn't fall asleep.
Yeah, if you're looking at this, at least in regards to the other movies we've watched from 1999, like, yeah, it's just not as bad as some of the other stuff that we've watched. So I can't rate it that low.
You know, I'll bump up a little bit too, because we have actually had a fairly complex conversation thematically coming out of this movie, whether it succeeded in doing it intentionally or not. So, I mean, because when we talked about Idle Hands or Message in a Bottle,
we were done in 30 minutes. Yes.
there's nothing other than just being angry. So I might upgrade a 2 to a 2.5. I might go middle of the road. I want to go lower.
So what's your final rating?
Yeah, 2.5.
Well, I was even more negative than you, Dave. I am giving this a 2, a solid 2. Just like you said, like I'm I can't say I was bored in this movie. I was constantly like, I have no idea what's going on. But there was, and I think what angers me more, like I said previously, is that I can see the elements of it. I can see these things that I think I would really love if it was handled in a better way, for lack of a good word to use, from the filmmakers. So it's like, it's extra frustrating because like I think there's actually a great movie hidden inside of this somewhere for me.
There were moments every 15 minutes where it could have broken into like a psychological thriller, a horror movie, right? Like a whodunit. There were so many little leads because there is something underneath it, but it just became about, I'm not sure.
So that does mean that this averages out to 2.25. However, we round down here on this show, so that goes down to a 2. That does mean that it's tied with one other film. It is tied with the very first film we talked on this podcast about, which is Varsity Blues. So, do you think this is a better or worse film than Varsity Blues?
Can you imagine comparing a movie in which Michael Caine wins a supporting actor role?
Yeah, I know.
To James Van Der Beek.
James Van Der Beek's football film. Yeah.
And actually having to think about it. It's better than Varsity Blues. I wouldn't watch Varsity Blues again either. And
I would agree with that. I would say it's better than that movie is too. So that does mean that entering our list at the 33rd position is the Cider House Rules.
I can't believe how petty both of you are.
Now, before we wrap up, Alex, why don't you tell people where they can find you on the internet if they want to continue hearing from you or reading from you?
Yeah, so if you want to find any of my podcasts, you can go to mechoradio.com. That's MECHO radio.com. That's where you'll find all of the shows that I either host, co-host, or edit/produce. And then from there, you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Alex Williams. And I spell Williams, WILLIAMNS, because as you can imagine, there are a lot of Alex Williamses.
To the extent where I honestly thought that is how you spelled your name for the longest time, with an N. I'm like, that's an interesting spelling. I was duped by the internet.
You know what? The lie is okay as long as his heart was in the right place.
Yeah.
Exactly. It came from out love.
Of love. We should probably find out what we're reviewing here next week. I kind of think I might know, just based on the fact that we have been talking about Oscar-nominated films here the past few weeks. But let me push this button. Yes, I was right. Dave, next week, we're going to be reviewing The Insider.
The Insider.
Talking about cigarettes and big tobacco. Alex, have you ever heard about The Insider, and have you ever watched it?
I've not.
You should.
It is also another film that is, I think, I have seen The Insider. I actually really like it, but it is not a film that anyone talks about at all anymore.
It's
we should have, actually, I think we kind of answered this in our talk, but do you think that the Cider House Rules has any cultural relevance anymore? Do you think anyone in 20 more years is going to be talking about this movie?
No.
Yeah, me neither. I literally don't think so. I think it's going to be lost to time pretty easily.
It's a great deadpan answer. For a 4 out of 5, Alex, I'm going to hold you to this.
Yeah.
I thought it was good. I just don't think it's important. You know, I think there are other things having the conversation better.
Yeah. There's movies that I also like them. Like, no one's ever going to watch this again, but I enjoy it. I think the simple fact that it is not available to stream anywhere is the tick against it. Yeah, it's hard. You've seen this actually time and time again, how movies have had like a second life because they are on like Amazon Prime or Netflix or somewhere else, so people can easily just watch them. And then things that aren't easy to find are just like they kind of get lost over time. All right, so Dave, man, I have just accumulated so many more of these urns. Here, just take this one and this one and this one and this one, and just go burn that. Don't look inside.
I thought you were gonna say go fuck yourself.
I love assholes.